Thank you. To speak after Professor Lumumba, who speaks with passion, with poetic language, I don't think I can match him. I will try to follow him, not to match him, I must admit. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I recognize that we are here gathered in this building, which itself is a legacy of Milton Obote. Actually, it was called Apollo Day. If my mind does not lie to me, the name may have changed, but history has not changed. So in that regard, as the main speaker has told us, we are here to critique and not to criticize. To criticize is to switch off your mind and you just point out the negatives of somebody or something without giving the alternatives or seeing the positives. But here we are saying, we are critiquing, and therefore we shall give due credit to where it is, and maybe where there is need to point out the pitfalls, we point them out, because by pointing out pitfalls, we are learning lessons. To assume that a human being who is not an angel did not make mistakes is to cover our heads under the sand as a proverbial ostrich. And so in that regard and in that spirit is how I am going to make my humble, small critique and discussion of Professor Lumumba's presentation. I'm saying it is humble and small. I cannot live up to his. To point out especially his ideas as reflected in the Common Man's Charter and move to the left strategy. Because the ideas that were pointed out in that blueprint are still relevant today, and we need to learn a lesson or two from those ideas as we craft a new Uganda. One is that Apollo Milton Obote believed in social justice. And no wonder he had a genealogy, or his party had a genealogy in Uganda National Congress, which was about also economic nationalism or economic justice. And these principles were about having a public sector. We have neglected the public sector, concentrated on the private sector, as if anybody can move on one leg. A human being or a nation needs to move on two legs. We can have both the public sector and the private sector. But we seem to be moving on one leg of the private sector. So the Common Man's Charter was about promoting the public sector so that it could benefit many people and overcome the challenges of the private sector. So we need to rethink the whole issue of promoting the public sector as envisaged in the move to the left strategy and Common Man's Charter. In this era of privatization and the free market ideology, we have neglected the public sector, and we tend to reward we tend to reward capital more than labor. And even at the global level, rewarding capital at the expense of labor has created a global economic crisis. We cannot afford to continue rewarding capital more than labor. So we need to learn a lesson or two from the Common Man's Charter and move to the left strategy spirit. Africa today, Uganda inclusive, needs to have strategic thinking when we are planning our economies. The challenge we have is that in Africa, East Africa and Uganda, we tend to have plans without strategic thinking. For example, what is the development ideology that guides our policies and plans in Africa. I don't seem to see any. And blueprints like the Common Man's Charter or the Musoma Resolution or the Arusha Declaration had a development ideology. It may have gone wrong, it may have had pitfalls, but at least there was a development ideology. So what is the development ideology now that we have in Uganda or indeed in this region of East Africa? We claim that we have an ideology, but I don't see the development ideology. At least I have not captured it from the existing systems. We have a development ideology as envisioned by the World Bank and the IMF and EU. And this is the ideology of maximizing profits. Human development is about human beings. It's not about mere infrastructure and other things like GDP and what we talk about. It should be human development, and therefore maximizing welfare, not necessarily maximizing profits. And I think this is a lesson that we can learn from the Common Man's Charter. Two, Common Man's Charter and Move to the Left strategy had other plans and objectives. One was to create national unity. The Common Man's Charter, the Move to the Left strategy had proposed an electoral system called 1+3 electoral system. The 1+3 electoral system was meant to cure sectarianism or ethnicity or inward looking. In this strategy, if it was put in plan, every member of parliament, aspiring member of parliament, was required to stand in his own constituency or her own constituency, plus other 3 constituencies outside your home region. In which case, if you became a minister or a government or whatever the case may be, you had to look at the whole of Uganda. If you didn't, in the next coming elections, the other constituencies would ignore you and you would lose, and no politician would want to lose. And therefore, this was going to be an incentive for most aspiring politicians to look at Uganda rather than have this inward looking like we have currently, that you must represent your county, which is increasingly becoming a parish. Related to that, it was going to cure this whole business of districtalization. Every tribe, every parish, every county, every small village is increasingly becoming a district, and it is dividing Uganda. And yet we are talking about East African integration and African integration. This is a contradiction in terms that as we are hoping to have East African Federation, we are again creating smaller and smaller and smaller districts. So the 1+3 was one of those. Another one actually was national service, that every able-bodied Ugandan, then, say after completing senior 4, you would have to have a national service, and you would serve in a region in Uganda where you are not born. Today, what would we see? People study from their home village, primary, secondary, universities are going to the village. Maybe you would work in your village and you will never see Uganda. You will never look at Uganda, you look only at your village. So national service was supposed to get people outside their home area. If you were a matoke eater, you would for the first time eat cassava. If you were a cassava eater, you would eat matoke. If you were a millet eater, you would now go and eat cassava or matoke or mayuni. And that was meant also to create national unity. One other principle under the Move to the Left strategy was unification of pay scales. I see the government of Uganda realizing it now. It was realized by the Obote government then, in 1969, that whether you are employed in a parastatal or a traditional government ministry, or would earn the same salary. I'm not saying everybody that would be earning the same salary. You'd earn the same salary according to your rank and experience, not because you are in a different government department. That was called unification of pay scales. I have heard it being talked today, and it was talked about in 1969. It is being realized today. There are strikes, among other reasons why there are strikes of civil servants is because of this discrimination in pay scales, that you are all government employees, public employees, one, and you have the same qualifications. One earns 40 million, another one earns 500,000. The unification of pay scales was meant to cure that one. So I submit that we can learn a lesson or two. If there is a media around here, you better get the common man's charter and move to the left strategy and publish them so that most Ugandans can read them and learn a lesson or two from the move to the left strategy. But you see, history is subjective. Are there weaknesses that we can also point out? I dare say yes. This may not be the occasion, but we can point out one or two. One, militarism. You may have a civilian government, but it can be militaristic. I remember Milton Obote asking Semogerere, where are your commanders? Where are your commanders? Semogerere didn't have the commanders. Milton Obote had the commanders, but the commanders overthrew him. If it is civilian government, or if we are pretending, or if you are saying that the government in power is a civilian government, let us have a civilian government, but this having a militarism underneath and on top, you sugarcoat with civilian government should stop. And I think if Milton Obote was around, he would have learned a lesson or two from putting the military ahead of the civilian power. UPC is doing, the professor says UPC is alive. I do agree, because what explains this one. But it is not well. Let us not pretend that UPC is well. UPC is alive, but it is not well. How many UPC presidents do we have? How many? You are beginning to hide your head under the sand. How many times have we had wars down here at Uganda House? UPC needs to put its house in order. It needs to rethink its administration. Actually, this business also of overstaying in power has a genealogy in UPC. I remember many people here at Uganda House telling the late Milton Obote, while he was in Zambia, that please relinquish the power of the leadership of UPC, and he refused. There are people on the ground who would have led UPC, and maybe it would be doing better than it is doing, but he kept on the leadership of UPC. And we are seeing the legacies of such, even when they are not said in public. This question of wanting to lead a party until further notice. We need to hand over power to the others when it is time. And let's see, that is the biggest insurance to our legacy. I think the professor pointed out this one also. That is the most insurance to our legacy. That you hand over power and you outlive your times when you are still alive, and guide those who succeed you when you are still around. The other legacy is that we should have wide agendas. The professor talked about broad agendas. We need to think about the future. They say that a politician looks at the next elections, but a statesman looks at the next generation. I wish we could learn lessons from that statement that also was alluded to by Professor Lumumba. Can we look at the next generation? Can we have statesmen in political power who look at the next generation, not at the next elections? Because looking at the next elections is narrow-mindedness. It is a narrow agenda. Uganda is not yet a nation state. I say Uganda is not yet a nation state. Using the words of Metternich, a one-time leader of Austria, Uganda is largely still a geographic expression. Using a computer metaphor, Uganda is largely a hardware. The software is still malfunctioning. We need to infuse into the hardware created at Berlin in 1884-85 with software that is functioning. And to do this one, we need to sit down at a round table. I propose there should be a round table conference or a national dialogue to see how to move this country forward, because this country is now almost stagnant. NRM, which is now holding the mantle of power, which is leading us, which has been a mass party. For the first time, they are saying, do not go and consult the people. It is now running away from the people. When you see somebody running away from the people, a party running away from the people, then you know it is pursuing a narrow agenda. And in this regard, we have to learn a lesson. I'm finishing, I'm coming to the end, Mr. Moderator, is that we need to have broad agendas, but in these broad agendas, we must be tolerant. What have I said? We must promote tolerance. There was a time when UPC was not tolerant. You heard Bwana Kanyomozi alluding to me that I was somewhere. While I was somewhere, I was watching closely. I know that Kanyomozi belongs to science, bit of science faction of UPC. There was a syndicate. That everything you meet on the way, you just clear, regardless of whether it is your fellow countryman or woman or not. There was intolerance, as the intolerance I can see even today. And we must learn lessons from that intolerance and cure that intolerance. UPC was intolerant to DP. I'm not saying that you should not oppose DP, but opposition doesn't mean enmity. An opposition is somebody to defeat, but not to kill. An opposition is somebody to converse with and defeat, but not to harass. You harass DP, who didn't have guns. There were those who had guns, who were in the bush, and they came and did what they did. DP was not listened to in Parliament. I listened to parliamentary debates, Honorable Kanyomozi. They would even be warned, some MPs would be warned that you talk that when we are out of this Parliament. You remember that one, don't you? Say it when we are outside of this Parliament and you will see. That was intolerance. Please, fellow Ugandans, the word fellow citizens used to be used by Obote. It is, by the way, he believes in citizenship. I wrote a piece in the last Sunday Monitor to say that what kind of independence do we have? Is it citizens' independence or state independence? So we are citizens, and let us live together peacefully as we compete, but not think we are enemies of each other. So the lesson we learned is that when UPC refused to tolerate the same organizers of DP who were civil, they met somebody who was not civil, and you saw what happened. Therefore, as I conclude, I am saying the people of Uganda, the people of East Africa should tolerate each other. Remember what is happening in Kenya now. We are all holding our breath. They are not tolerant to each other. The people in Burundi are not tolerating each other. The people in Sudan are not tolerating each other. Even the people of Tanzania, for the first time, they are also not tolerating each other. Can we learn lessons from the pitfalls of the past and tolerate each other as Africans? If we don't tolerate each other, there is somebody lurking in the wings to come and swallow up. That is neocolonialism. That is the Western powers. We better tolerate each other, or else we are going to be recognized. I submit. I sit down. Thank you very much.